Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to take a stack of sources, the dense, the fragmented, sometimes the really controversial, and just pull out the essential knowledge for you.
And today we are definitely in that territory.
We are. Today we're diving into one of the most, I think, fraught and systemically complex sagas of the last decade, the world of Jeffrey Epstein.
Our source stack is pretty extensive. We're looking at the cold, hard facts from federal indictments, the incredibly meticulous and damning findings of the 2023 DOJ Inspector General's report on his death.
And critically, this is the part that I find fascinating. We have an academic analysis that basically gives us a blueprint for how modern conspiracy narratives get built.
Right, and that's key because this is a two-pronged analysis. We really need to be clear about our focus here. We are not here to relitigate the criminal case. We're using the case as a lens to look at two really deep-seated issues. First, what is this mountain of documentation, the OIG reports, the recent Epstein Files, what does it actually reveal about these profound chronic institutional failures?
Right, within the federal government, within the prison system. And then the second part, which I think is the most critical component for you, the learner, is understanding the fallout. How do those documented failures, the negligence, the fragmentation, the political opacity, how do they create the perfect storm for global conspiracy theories?
Exactly. We're looking at the anatomy of the distrust. This case is, it's the perfect case study.
So we're working with the official record, the 2019 indictment, that definitive 2023 OIG investigation into his death at the MCC.
The Metropolitan Correctional Center.
Right. And all those politically charged document releases that have been rolling out across 2024 and 2025, that's a huge amount of material.
It is, and it can be overwhelming. So we're going to navigate it theme by theme, starting right at the foundation, the facts of the crime, and really the scope of Epstein's influence.
Okay, let's start there. Let's unpack the scope of the crimes. Epstein was, he was a figure who operated openly in these two huge worlds, high finance and high society.
Right, with homes in New York and Palm Beach. And he was initially caught and indicted way back in 2006.
Which led to that infamous 2008 plea deal in Florida.
And that deal is so important to understand. It allowed him to plead guilty to 2 state prostitution charges, serve just 13 months, and, crucially, avoid federal prosecution.
Which meant he avoided that high-profile federal scrutiny.
It absolutely did. It allowed the whole enterprise to just continue, at least implicitly, and it protected all the names in his orbit from federal exposure back then. The 2019 indictment, though, that was a different story.
That was federal.
Yeah.
And it was much, much more comprehensive. It basically confirmed what so many victims had been saying for years. This wasn't just sporadic abuse.
No, this was a decades-long systematic enterprise. A conspiracy to sex traffic minors across multiple states, mainly New York and Palm Beach.
The documents are just crystal clear on the age and the vulnerability of the victims.
They are. They were often sourced from desperate situations, and the indictment is very specific that victims were as young as 14 years old.
And crucially, the prosecution established that Epstein knew. He knew they were minors. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident.
No, it was a deliberate choice to target the vulnerable. The method itself, it just underscores the transactional nature of it all. It was industrialized.
The sources confirm victims were typically paid in cash. Hundreds of dollars for each sexual encounter.
And that monetary component, that makes it easier to control them, to silence them. It turns the abuse into a commodity.
The documents also really highlight the role of the co-conspirators. The indictment doesn't just name Epstein.
No, it refers to employee 1, employee 2, and so on. These people were integral to the whole thing. They weren't just, peripheral staff.
They were actively involved in the logistics.
Completely. Contacting victims, coordinating flights, scheduling the appointments at his mansion in New York or the estate in Palm Beach. It was a well-oiled machine. It needed active human facilitation to run.
And that brings us right to the operational linchpin of the whole thing, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Right. His longtime girlfriend, and as her conviction in December 2021 proved, she was absolutely central to the conspiracy.
Her role was, what? The management of the abuse pipeline.
That's a perfect way to put it. She handled the hiring, supervising, firing of staff, the personnel management, starting way back around 1992.
So she professionalized it.
She did. She ensured there was continuity, efficiency in recruiting and scheduling minors. She was the chief operating officer of the entire predatory operation.
And the story of Virginia's short-free Lily illustrates how that system worked and how it plugged into the world of the super rich.
It does. Jeffrey was one of the most outspoken victims, and the sources confirm Maxwell hired her in 2000 as a masseuse. Jeffrey was 17.
And the detail here that always connects back to the political fallout,
Yeah.
just before that, she had been working at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago spa.
And that specific detail, that shift in employment from a spa at an exclusive resort to the epicenter of Epstein's world, that became a critical point in connecting the criminal network to these high-profile social circles.
It raises so many questions about recruitment tactics and access.
And the scope of that recruitment was just breathtakingly international. It suggests a global sourcing strategy.
The investigation docs mention allegations about 12-year-old triplets flown in from France.
Right, and we also see evidence of recruitment efforts aimed at South American and former Soviet countries.
The network even extended into vulnerable industries.
It did. The sources detail the involvement of the modeling agency MC2, which Epstein financed. The allegation, which was confirmed by multiple reports, was that this agency served as an alleged pipeline.
Providing access to young people who are looking for opportunities.
Exactly. Which Epstein and his associates then exploited. The combination of his money and that international access, it made his operation truly borderless.
So now we need to pivot to the source of his real power, which was the financial and social networks that shielded him for so long. This is the area that has sparked the most public demand for transparency.
Yeah, and we have to look at the contact book. A partially redacted version was made public during the 2025 Phase 1 document release.
And it confirms he systematically cultivated this social circle. Politicians, financiers, academics, celebrities.
It wasn't random mingling. This was strategic networking. It was designed to create layers of protection and access.
And his money was the foundation for all of it. The scale of his financial arrangements is often, overshadowed by the criminal details, but it really explains his longevity.
It does. Sources like Forbes noted that between 1999 and 2018, he generated something like $490 million in fees.
And the vast majority of that came from just two billionaires.
Just two. Leslie Wexner, who paid Epstein $200 million, and Leon Black, who paid him $170 million. He was worth around $600 million when he died, though the press, they always questioned if he was a true billionaire.
But here's where we need to slow down, because there's a complex financial piece here that ties Epstein directly to a global catastrophe.
The 2008 financial crisis, this connection is so often missed. It gets buried under the more sensational details.
Right, so between 2000 and 2007, Epstein was the president of a Bermuda-incorporated company. It was called Liquid Funding Ltd.
And this company played a very specific, very high-stakes role in the lead-up to the 2008 crisis. Liquid funding was pioneering the expansion of what kind of assets could be accepted on the repo market.
Okay, so for listeners who might not be familiar, the repo market, that's short for repurchase agreement, it's basically where financial institutions get short-term loans, right? Often overnight.
Exactly. Using high-quality assets as collateral. It's the plumbing of the global financial system.
And what liquid funding did was it made that plumbing way more complex.
It did. They were accepting and dealing in these very complex securities. What that means is they were bundling commercial and residential mortgages, which are inherently high risk, into these large synthetic securities.
And then those were used as collateral on the repo market.
That's it. And the risk was in the ratings. These bundled securities got these highly desirable AAA ratings from the big agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, Moody's, despite the risk.
Why? Why would they do that?
Because the ratings agencies just failed to accurately assess the danger of the subprime mortgages that were packaged inside them.
So when the housing market collapsed,
those complex securities imploded. Their true toxic value was revealed. The source material draws a direct line from the failure of those securities, which liquid funding was deeply involved with, to the collapse of Bear Stearns in March 2008.
Which is seen as the trigger for the wider global financial crisis.
The implication is it's profound. Epstein wasn't just managing money for the elite. He was actively involved in high-level, high-risk financial engineering that contributed directly to a near-total global economic breakdown.
And the scale of the money flowing through his operations was just immense.
Unbelievable. Wire transfers tracked across just 4 major banks. JP Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, Bank of New York Mellon, and Bank of America totaled more than $1.9 billion.
So that's the foundation. Global reach, huge financial leverage, and a systemic criminal enterprise. Now we turn to the second major theme of this deep dive, the total documented breakdown of the institutions that were meant to hold him accountable. We're talking about his death in federal custody.
And this section, it relies so heavily on the 2023 DOJ Inspector General's report, which is, I mean, it's perhaps the most devastating document in our entire source stack when it comes to institutional accountability.
And this isn't a conspiracy theory.
No. This is meticulous documentation of chronic systemic failure at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, MCC, New York.
Let's start with the events right before his death in July 2019. On July 23rd, just weeks before he died, Epstein was found injured in his cell.
Semi-conscious, with marks around his neck, and the correctional staff immediately suspected one of two things: either an attempted suicide or an assault.
So this should have put the facility on high alert.
It should have. And to be fair, he was correctly placed on suicide watch. But 6 days later, on July 29th, they took him off suicide watch and moved him to a special housing unit, the SHU.
Okay, so what is the SHU?
It's a restrictive housing area, basically solitary or administrative segregation. But here's the critical part. The policy of the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, states that any inmate taken off suicide watch must be assigned a cellmate for continuous observation.
That was the first line of defense.
It was, and it was compromised almost immediately.
And there's one more really unusual detail from just 2 days before his death.
On August 8th, 2019, he met with his attorneys and signed a new last will and testament. This is significant because it suggests he's actively managing his affairs, he's planning.
And the MCC personnel had no idea.
The OIG report says they were completely unaware he had executed a new will until after he was found dead.
So the chain of failures that led to his death really began in earnest on the night of August 9th.
Into the 10th. And the OIG report details this sequence with just forensic precision. The first failure was the cellmate violation.
On August 9th, his cellmate was transferred out.
Right. And despite the explicit, very recent requirement from the psychology department that Epstein must have a cellmate since he just came off suicide watch, he was not assigned a replacement.
So he was left alone in the SHU. A direct violation of policy.
A direct and major violation of a BOP policy specifically designed to prevent this exact outcome in vulnerable inmates.
Which brings us to the guard misconduct.
Shocking misconduct. The two staff members on duty in the SHU that night were Michael Thomas and Tova Noel. They were required to perform mandatory physical inmate counts at midnight, 3 a.m., and 5 a.m.
And the OIG report confirmed they didn't do any of them.
Not a single one. They later admitted to investigators that they just falsified the count slips to make it look like they'd done the rounds.
And the OIG report dove into why this happened, and it points directly to mass staff fatigue and chronic understaffing.
It's the systemic rot. We have to focus on Thomas's shift. This staff member had already worked an overtime shift, then his regular shift, and then another overtime shift in the SHU.
That's 22 consecutive hours.
22 consecutive hours worked by the time that night shift even began. The OIG documented that his supervisor used poor judgment in even asking him to work that third consecutive shift.
Because it would be extremely difficult for him to do his job.
To put it mildly, the report paints this picture of a facility just crippled by budget issues, low morale, and supervisors basically forcing staff to work themselves to exhaustion. It makes basic security procedures impossible.
And that fatigue led directly to the round failure.
It did. BOP policy requires SHU inmates to be observed at least twice an hour, so every 30 minutes. The OIG concluded Noel and Thomas didn't check on Epstein for about 3 hours.
They admitted they fell asleep.
They did. He was found dead at 6:30 a.m. on August 10th. And what's critical here is that the staff's initial reaction was documented as being consistent with them being completely surprised.
So they weren't actors in a cover-up?
According to the report, no. They were documented as highly fatigued, negligent employees who failed to do their basic duties and left a high-risk inmate completely unmonitored for hours.
So we've got negligence and procedure failure. But the second, and maybe the most politically charged institutional failure, was the breakdown of the security apparatus itself, the non-recording cameras.
Which, as we said, provided the perfect factual kindling for the conspiracy theories. The investigation revealed the MCC's camera system was just ancient, an outdated analog system.
And the OIG had been documenting deficiencies with it since at least 2013.
This wasn't a sudden malfunction. This was a chronic, known vulnerability in the system.
And the immediate failure was the DVR2 system on July 29, 2019.
Coincidentally, the very day Epstein was removed from suicide watch.
A disk failure occurred in this system, and the consequence was catastrophic for the investigation.
It was. The DVR2 failure caused nearly half of the institution's cameras, including almost all the cameras covering the SHU where Epstein was, to display only a live video feed.
So there was no recording.
No recording capacity whatsoever. The system showed what was happening in real time, but it saved absolutely nothing.
And here's the bureaucratic absurdity that just highlights the failure. The problem went undetected for 11 days.
11 days, from July 29th to August 8th. And when they finally discovered it on August 8th, they got the replacement drives. But the repair was postponed.
Until after he was dead.
Why? Because the technician needed access to the DVR room, but the keyholder's shift ended at 4 p.m., and the keyholder was, and I'm quoting here, unable to stay and accompany him.
You have to be kidding me.
Think about that. The security system for one of the most high-profile inmates on the planet had been failing for 11 days. And the repair, a simple drive swap, was postponed because of a shift change.
The bureaucracy was more important than the security.
The system prioritized the bureaucracy over the immediate high-security repair. And the OIG later confirmed the lack of recorded video seriously impaired their investigation. It's the literal definition of an information vacuum.
Which brings us to the official conclusions. The New York City medical examiner, Barbara Sampson, she officially ruled the death a suicide by hanging on August 16, 2019.
But that ruling was immediately disputed, which gave instant legitimacy to the murder narrative.
By the forensic pathologist Michael Baden, who was hired by the Epstein estate.
Right. Baden noted that Epstein had sustained multiple neck injuries, including a fractured hyoid bone. That's a small bone in the neck.
And he argued that was unusual.
He argued that while, yes, some hyoid breaks can occur in suicidal hangings, the nature of Epstein's injuries, the combination of multiple breaks, was, in his words, extremely unusual in suicidal hangings and could occur much more commonly in homicidal strangulation.
So it's not definitive proof of murder.
Not at all. But it is a professional forensic disagreement that when you combine it with the documented negligence at MCC, it created an undeniable basis for public skepticism.
So the facts show this complex global criminal network, followed by a total documented collapse of federal custody procedures, systemic staff exhaustion, and a catastrophic security technology failure, all contributing to an unverified death conclusion. This just sets the perfect stage for the political spectacle that followed.
And that next phase of the saga begins after his death, driven by this relentless public and political pressure for transparency. The central narrative that just completely dominated public discourse was the search for the client list.
Right. The theory that Epstein kept this list of powerful people he was actively blackmailing.
This theory just gained incredible currency. It was fueled heavily by social media influencers, political commentators, and it intensified dramatically in 2025 when the files were ordered to be released.
And in late 2023, a judge ordered the release of names of more than 170 Epstein associates, which just validated the public's demand for more information.
But then came the whiplash, the moment of official contradiction. Former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi had famously claimed the client list was sitting on my desk.
But then, in July 2025, the DOJ and FBI released a memo that concluded, after their investigation, that they had found no evidence of an actual physical client list, or that he had successfully blackmailed powerful people.
And they reaffirmed the death was a suicide.
I mean, that public reversal is a textbook example of how you erode trust. An official promises sensational findings, feeding the narrative, and then a government body releases a memo dismissing those very findings.
The default public assumption is cover-up.
Exactly. A cover-up to protect the names, regardless of what's actually in the memo.
And we saw the exact same thing happen with the release of the prison video. This was supposed to be the final word.
This is the attempted debunking. In July 2025, the FBI released CCTV footage, and they said its purpose was to confirm he died by suicide alone in his cell.
But the attempt to debunk failed immediately and just spectacularly. Forensic analysis of the footage they released proved that the video, which the FBI claimed was raw, had been modified.
He was missing nearly 3 full minutes. It just jumped abruptly from 11.58.58 to 12.00000.
I mean, that is a catastrophic breach of trust. Subsequent reports noted a government official admitted the video was deliberately edited to remove that minute, and critically, an unedited version allegedly remains in the FBI's possession.
You could not engineer a better piece of evidence for people promoting the idea of a cover-up.
You couldn't. Yeah. Releasing a flawed, modified document to prove innocence is it's unbelievable.
So let's turn to the specific, high-profile political names that surfaced in the document releases in 2025, because this is where the political information war was waged most intensely. And it really cut across party lines.
It did. The relationship between Epstein and Donald Trump was detailed thoroughly. Their friendship reportedly cooled in the early 2000s because of two specific disputes. One was a real estate deal where Trump outbid Epstein for a Palm Beach mansion in 2004.
And the other dispute links directly back to the criminal operation. The sources suggest Trump complained about Epstein stealing Mar-a-Lago staff,
referencing Virginia Giuffre in 2000. And it's a striking contradiction, isn't it? Despite this knowledge of Epstein's predatory recruitment involving his staff, Trump didn't cancel Epstein's Mar-a-Lago membership until 2007, 7 years later.
The nature of their social interaction was also revealed in some specific anecdotes.
Yes, in 2003, for Epstein's 50th birthday, Ghislaine Maxwell assembled a birthday album that included a body greeting from Donald Trump, and later, in November 2025, new emails surfaced alleging Trump knew about Epstein's conduct.
And Epstein himself was quoted saying, "I know how dirty Donald is." It places both figures right in that complex web of social connections.
And the pressure for full disclosure spurred this rare bipartisan legislative action. In late 2025, both the House and the Senate unanimously approved bills to force the DOJ to release more Epstein files,
which the president signed into law.
And this was hailed as this huge win for transparency, but the pattern of opacity just immediately reasserted itself. When the DOJ began releasing the files in December 2025, the initial trove was ascribed by oversight committees as heavily redacted.
So the information flowed, but it was controlled. It was incomplete.
Frustrating both sides of the political aisle, and the House Oversight Committee releases also brought forward numerous other high-profile names, emphasizing just how nonpartisan Epstein's network was.
Figures from tech and politics: Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon.
The Bannon connection is particularly strange. Sources noted that in 2019, Bannon interviewed Epstein for a staggering 15 hours.
Why?
Allegedly prepping him for a 60 Minutes interview that never happened. It just highlights how high-level political strategists maintained access or at least sought proximity to Epstein even after his initial arrest.
And then, of course, the political establishment figures. Bill Clinton's connections were reinforced in new documents. But maybe one of the most surprising revelations was about Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, the prominent left-wing intellectual. The documents revealed deeper ties, including photos showing Chomsky on Epstein's private jet. He defended the association, but the key takeaway for the public is this repeated convergence of seemingly opposite, powerful domains.
Financiers, academics, celebrities, politicians from both parties.
And this constant, fragmented flow of information connecting all these diametrically opposed public figures, it is the absolute perfect breeding ground for these totalizing conspiracy narratives. The system is essentially poisoning itself.
The institutional failures create a massive information vacuum, and then the attempts to fill that vacuum with these fragmented, politically managed releases. It just confirms everyone's worst suspicions.
Which brings us to the most analytical section of our deep dive. We're going to shift from the facts of the case to that academic analysis we mentioned, a paper studying how COVID-19 conspiracies gain traction. This provides a literal scientific blueprint for the Epstein Files fallout.
Okay, so we've established the facts of the crime and the facts of the institutional breakdown. Now, what are the necessary ingredients to convert all that chaos into a durable, viral conspiracy theory?
What's fascinating here is the identification of the conditions. Conspiracy theories thrive when three conditions are met. There is low confidence in established institutions, low trust in authority, and a lack of authoritative scientific or governmental consensus.
And if you apply that model to the Epstein case, the fit is perfect. The MCC had chronic documented failures, the FBI released a demonstrably modified video, and the political information war involved sensational claims followed by retractions and heavy redactions.
That trifecta lack of consensus, low trust, and low confidence, it guarantees that informal stories and raw speculation are going to intermingle with fact-based reporting. It's inevitable.
So the academic analysis proposes that these narratives emerge not just from a single lie, but through the alignment of otherwise disparate domains of knowledge.
Exactly. They're synthesizing a story by stitching together unrelated, verifiable facts. The goal isn't to find one hidden truth. It's to create a coherent, totalizing narrative that explains all the disparate facts.
And the paper breaks this down into three key observable mechanisms. Let's walk through them.
The first one is the easiest to spot: incorporation into existing theories. This is the tendency to take a new major crisis, like a pandemic, or the death of a major global trafficker, and just fold it into a well-known, pre-existing master narrative.
So that's just taking a new event and shoving it into the pre-existing QAnon box. The source used that exact example. QAnon already includes these massive components of child sex trafficking, elite cabals, secret underground tunnels.
Right. And Epstein's documented international network, his multiple homes, his private island, it fits perfectly into that existing framework, regardless of any new specific facts. It's an instant narrative fit.
Okay, so what's the second mechanism?
The second is the alignment of new theories. This is more sophisticated. It's about constructing larger narratives by linking domains that seem completely unrelated until the theorist connects the dots for you.
And the academic example was aligning the COVID-19 pandemic with long-standing anti-vax sentiments, and then linking both of those to the idea that Bill Gates is using the virus as a cover for a worldwide surveillance state.
Exactly. The virus, the vaccine, the philanthropist, they become one seamless, coordinated action.
Mhm.
Now, if we apply that model rigorously to Epstein, the documented systemic failure of the MCC's analog DVR system.
That's a technical IT domain.
Right. That is aligned with the fact that powerful political figures from both parties are named in his contact book.
A social and political domain.
And the resulting narrative is powerful. Suddenly, the technical failures of a federal prison camera, which are attributable to budget cuts and negligence, are reinterpreted as proof of intentional, coordinated deletion by the powerful people in that contact book.
The domains are now aligned to form one grand narrative of intentional concealment.
And finally, the third mechanism, the reinterpretation of factual events. Stories thrive by attaching to key facts that might be otherwise innocent or just attributable to incompetence and then linking them to this overarching bad actor framework.
The academic paper noted that real events, like setting up field hospitals during COVID, were linked by theorists to the idea of underground tunnels and child sex trafficking. The hospitals were real, but their meaning was completely flipped.
Okay, using the Epstein case, the factual events are: 1. A professional forensic pathologist, Michael Baden, notes a broken hyoid bone. That's a fact that could occur in suicide, but is more common in homicide. 2. The FBI releases CCTV footage that is demonstrably missing 3 minutes. These are verifiable facts.
But they are immediately reinterpreted. Instead of attributing the broken bone to an unusual hazing or the missing video, to a bureaucratic error in a file transfer.
These isolated facts are linked by theorists to that overarching bad actor framework, proving he was murdered by the elite to protect the names on the list. The facts don't need to logically connect. They just need to exist and be fragmented or unexplained to be woven into the grand narrative.
And this whole process is accelerated by the new social media feedback loop.
Massively. The analysis showed this pervasive flow of information between social media and news reports, creating this rapid entanglement of fact and speculation.
The data here is pretty stark. Analysis of news reports from early 2020 showed an exponential increase in the number of common neighbors between the terms coronavirus and conspiracy theory over time.
They were becoming inseparable in public discourse at breakneck speed, each one validating the other. And this is the speed at which official information vacuums get filled.
The MCC camera failure went undetected for 11 days. The document releases were heavily redacted.
That slowness, that fragmentation, that demonstrable flaw, it instantly provides sticky, undeniable evidence for narratives suggesting powerful, intentional concealment. The institutional void is not tolerated. It is instantly populated by these totalizing, aligning stories.
Which means the most effective strategy for combating distrust isn't arguing against the theory itself, but ensuring the institutions operate with such competence that the factual gaps never appear in the first place.
We've covered a huge amount of ground here. From complex financial schemes to the minute-by-minute failures in a federal prison, and finally, to the academic science of how these failures breed distrust. It's time to synthesize the core takeaways for you.
The primary conclusion has to be the sheer scale of the accountability gap, and it's driven by these dual institutional failures. On one side, you have the complete systemic breakdown of federal custody procedures.
Mass staff fatigue, guards falsifying logs, the long-standing chronic failure of security cameras that goes back years.
And on the other side, you have the political controversy and opacity in how all the related documents were handled. The promotion of the client list, then its dismissal, the release of a modified video, the heavy redactions.
And these two forms of failure, operational negligence and informational control, they compound each other perfectly.
And the accountability was, it was staggeringly limited. Despite indisputable evidence of misconduct, like the guards admitting they falsified logs, the consequences were minimal.
The two guards received supervised release, no jail time. The system demonstrated these deep, chronic flaws, yet the consequences were minor for the institutions responsible. The lesson here is that chronic institutional failure often shields the institution itself from true accountability.
And this just reinforces the power of the information vacuum. The common thread between the Epstein saga and the analysis of COVID conspiracies is simple. When official, trustworthy information is unavailable, slow, or demonstrably flawed.
When the surveillance system is broken for 11 days, or the video is released with pieces missing.
It instantly validates the intentional concealment narrative. The technical failure becomes proof of murder. The heavy redaction becomes proof of a protected client list.
And how did the ultimate stakeholders in all this, the survivors, respond to this information war and this institutional opacity?
This is maybe the most powerful part of the story. The source notes that the frustration with official releases was so high that victims and their representatives began discussing compiling their own client list of influential associates known to them.
That move highlights a complete collapse of trust in the state's ability or willingness to deliver the truth. The survivors effectively decided they had to create their own truth, independent of the compromised official channels. Their statement was a powerful indictment.
They said, "Now together, as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know who were regularly in the Epstein world, and it will be done by survivors and for survivors. No one else is involved."
That action is just a profound moment. The injured party has to actively circumvent the state to achieve informational clarity. It summarizes this entire deep dive. The institutional failures were so profound that they forced the victims to become their own investigators and their own public records custodians.
We have unpacked two incredibly complex situations here: the documented failures surrounding the death of a major trafficker and the scientific understanding of how misinformation narratives get built.
And the tragic intersection is that moment of institutional failure, which just guarantees that distrust will flourish.
Which leaves us with this provocative final thought for you to mull over. If even a highly controlled environment, like a federal prison security system, can suffer from widespread, systemic, and chronic failure in staffing, in procedure, in hardware, and if subsequent investigations struggle to provide unassailable, complete evidence, modified video, heavy redaction controversies, what does this vulnerability suggest about our collective ability to discern the truth in any crisis where powerful interests or institutional negligence intersect?
The lesson is clear. When the source materials themselves are fragmented or compromised, when the government provides a demonstrably incomplete picture, how can you, the learner, critically deconstruct a narrative? The answer lies not just in recognizing the conspiracy theory, but in identifying the precise moment and the nature of the institutional failure that made the conspiracy theory necessary in the first place. The conspiracy is often an institutionally guaranteed answer to an institutional vacuum.
A heavy but essential thought for navigating the modern information landscape. That was the deep dive. We'll see you next time.